Welcome then, Year 11, to your first revision guide to English Language Paper 1, Section A, Question 1. This is what you know then as the easy paper, or the easy question. I have with me today my Year 11 set, who have got about a month or so to go before they actually do their English Language GCSE. In their previous mocks before now, when they've attempted this question, they've got anywhere between 5 marks out of 5 or 2 marks out of 5. So you have some people who are very capable at this question and others that might need a bit of practice to improve. So we're going to focus on question 1, as I said, the easy question, otherwise known as the listing question, I suppose. Question 1 then will ask you to list information in some way or another. So my first question would have to be, well, what is a list? Libby, could you tell me, please, what is a list? Libby is one of our more advanced students. And another student has decided to help Libby out in her moment of need, and Harvey has responded with a shopping list. He hasn't given an example, so I would like to ask Harvey for an example of what he means by that, and I'm hoping a certain type of writing appears. So either Harvey or Libby could give me an answer here, and that's now been added to by saying a list of things, which I'll take to be a list of objects in some way. So we now have Libby responding with a number of words or names. And another student has responded with like quotes or statements. We now have at least 4 or 5 students telling me what a list is, which is wonderful, which tells me they're going to understand the question when they're set it in the exam. So let's think about this. How long would a list have to be to qualify as a list? Would we say 2 objects makes a list, or would we expect more? Any one of the 4 or 5 people responding? 2 or more? Most people say more. You'd be right. Anything 3 or more counts as a list. You'd expect to see commas in that list as a general rule. So in this case, you are going to be asked to write a list about something, and you are going to be expected then to rattle off quite a series of things. Thank you very much. So you are absolutely right then, Year 11. List means a record of short pieces of information, often listed off in a sentence in some way with commas in between each one. Exactly right. So in an actual English exam, in this case English language, how would this look on the exam paper? Well, it will ask you to read lines something something and then list 5 things you learn about, and then whatever the topic might be on the day. So it makes clear how many things they want, and it wants you to read a certain number of lines to get there. Bullet points is exactly right. One of the students has mentioned they remember this being in bullet points. That is correct. 5 bullet points is what they'll give you, and if you get 5 out of 5, you would then get a grade 9 from this question. So now let's look at an example question from, I think it's an exam that happened maybe 2 years ago, possibly 3. So it will tell you read lines 1 to 17, let's say. It might then say list 5 things you learn about Jonathan in lines 1 to 17. Let's unpick that question a little bit. There you see a highlighted version with the key information in red. The examiner makes clear which parts of the text you should look at and repeats the information you need. Any information outside these lines doesn't count. So if you were to include information from, let's say, line 20, that would not count as being a right answer. So you need to be careful exactly which lines the exam board are asking you about. They want a list, which means then they want 5 things, not 6, just 5. If you go over the number, you'll simply lose half the marks because you've not read the question. This tells you that your responses should not be in a paragraph, they should be a set of bullet points. And often the exam will give you like 1 line per bullet point. So it's really obvious they want 5 because this is where you get 5 very easy marks very early on in the test to give yourself a superb head start towards that halfway number of marks you need to pass the test. As a general rule, then you want to write your answers in short sentences. So each one should be a sentence as you write it. These should link to the question set and make sure you don't repeat the same response twice. So key advice to pass this section would be to use short sentence answers. They shouldn't be one word, but they should be short sentence answers that repeat the wording of the question. Let's have a look at a mini example then that hopefully many of the Year 11 listening will remember from previous years, just as a very brief recap, just to remind of what this question looks like. List 5 things you learn about the police force. And they've been given, as you can see on the screen, a short primary school type paragraph which includes certain facts of information. Now I know all the Year 11s listening can easily find the information. They could give me one-word answers very easily, but they have to be in short sentences to 100% guarantee they've got it right. So it's 5 things you learn about the police force, and I'm now typing in the chat the opening of each sentence. I learn that the police force, and then that should do. So I'm putting in that sentence starter right at the start before we could do anything else and putting that in the chat. And it's going to be, I learned that the police force something, something, something. Okay, one person has now responded, the police force needs young recruits. I look back at the answer, I look for that information, I look at the text, and I agree that one of the 5 would be the police force needs young recruits is definitely one. I learned the police force has £20,000 starting salary. Would also get me that. The numbers right there, but starting salary would be needed from that response. I now have 3 answers written in the chat. The police force needs young recruits. I learned that police force need to be young. I learned the police force has a £20,000 salary. Let's say those 3 then form 3 answers, but it would only get 2 marks because one answer has been repeated twice. And now we now have more or less the rest of the group responding. I learned the police force is local. I learned the police force need intelligence. Let's assume, Kaylee, there's no irony in that statement, shall we? Okay. So there we go. Yes, so all of those would mostly get marks. Just watch out for repeating someone else's response or one of your own responses. And some of them just need a slight amendment to say that it's new recruits that need those qualities, not the police force in general. Okay, people found that very easy. All of the answers given in the chat were full sentences using the wording of the question. So it's a really good start. The criteria the exam board will be looking for. Yes, one student's just written every time I finish right, another student's already written it. I know the feeling, Kaylee. Okay, the criteria for this question then is that it's asked you to identify explicit, which means obvious, and implicit information. So some of the bullet points they're looking for will be literally as obvious as the text you just read. Others will involve you just thinking a bit about the information given and what that suggests about the thing. You'll see an example of that in a second. You'll get 1 mark for each bullet point or inference identified. So each student's answer would potentially get 1 mark to a maximum of 5. The exam board will give the person marking the work 15 possible answers, and you've just got to get 5 of them right, which is why this question's so easy. They will give you more answers in the text than you actually need, and you just need to think which ones are right for me, which ones do I understand, and you write down 5 of them. No marks should be awarded for unabridged quotation of whole sentences. So if on one of your bullet points you give more information than they want, you'll get 0 for that because you're not being specific enough to what they're asking. Let's move along. We're now going to look at 3 examples, and the first one you're going to have 10 minutes to answer yourselves. So you're going to have 10 minutes to answer this first one, and I'll read the text out to you to help. List 5 things you learn about Jonathan in lines 1 to 17. And what you can see there is an excerpt from a previous exam paper. At the top of that piece of writing, it's got a bit in italics, okay, which gives you an overview of the text itself. In this case, you've got Jonathan and Frances are a young married couple who are in Dorset for a week's holiday in a rented cottage. They've got 2 young children called Lorna and Matthew. That does not count as the lines that you can look at, but it does say lines 1 to 17. And what I've done is cropped the piece of writing so you can only see lines 1 to 17. You'll notice there are numbers down the left-hand side which tell you the line markers so you can see exactly how long 1 to 17 actually is. I'm now going to read this out, and feel free to begin writing your responses in your notepads, not in the chat just yet, for this question. So 5 things you learn about Jonathan is what we're looking for. Why does everything have to take so long? Moaned Jonathan. It only takes me 5 minutes to get ready. Frances didn't bother to answer. She was sagging with the effort and boredom of assembling everything needed for a morning out in the car. Juice, beaker with a screw-on lid, towels, change of clothes in case of car sickness, nappies, rattle. There was more. What was it? Oh, come on, Jonathan, think, she said. I'm fed up with having to plan it all. What do you think I've been doing for the last hour? He shouted. Who was that in charge of Matthew's nappy just now, eh? Congratulations, she said. Don't shout or I'll cry. Why is everything such a mess, said Jonathan, picking up plastic spiders, dinosaurs, beads and bears, scowling grimly over the pile of primary colours. I want that spider, Daddy, screamed Lorna. Give it to me! During the ensuing struggle, Frances thought about her tiredness. The year following the arrival of her first baby had gone in pure astonishment at the loss of freedom, but second time round it was spinning away in exhaustion. Matthew woke at 1 a.m., 4 a.m., and Lorna at 6:30 a.m. During the days, fatigue wore her down. Are we ready at last? Said Jonathan, breathing heavily. Are we ready to go? Please now find 5 things you learn about Jonathan. Think about how you word it, make sure they're in short sentences. This would need to take you 5 minutes if you're in the actual exam. For today, I would give you 10 minutes to do it. So you've got till 3:05 to complete this question. Some students already replying in the chat. I respectfully remind them that it has to be full sentences using the wording of the question. Okay, you've got 10 minutes till 3:05. Then I'll start reading out anything that appears on the chat. We should be ready to resume. Okay, you now have just under 5 minutes to go. You should comfortably have got these right, but please double check the rules I've already said. It should be short sentences, it should link to the question set, and this is a bad question because there are things you could easily get wrong. So please just double check your work. This should be a guaranteed 5 marks. Just take your time over it, no rush whatsoever. Okay, another 3 minutes to go before I go through some answers with you that previous years have written and why some of them got marks and why some of them didn't. Okay, let's gauge that success. To feedback then, we need 3 marks out of a possible 5 to get yourselves a grade 5 mark. And all of our 3 of you have done this in the past, so should have been a win-win. Now I'm just going to focus on the last answer in the chat. Kindly, a young man called Liam has responded with his entire answer. At a rough glance, I can see he has 5 answers. At a rough glance, I can see that he's used the wording of the question in most of those responses, if not all of them. And on some of them, he's used explicit information, and others he's inferred something he can guess about Jonathan. But there's no doubt he's answered the question, given correct response that fit with the number of lines given, and they're all focused on the right character. It would have been really easy to focus accidentally on Frances, because she actually dominates the extract quite a lot. So his first answer reads, I have learnt that Jonathan is a father of 2. There is no doubt that's the right answer here. There's lots of evidence to suggest that is the case. So 1 mark for that. 2, Jonathan's a tired man as his new baby is waking him early in the morning. Now, we're inferred that he's tired. We can guess that he's tired based on the information we're given. To be exact, we are told that Frances is suffering fatigue, but I think it's fair to say that we can guess that Jonathan is too, based on the wake-up times we're given. So I would give you a mark for number 2 as well. Number 3, we find out Jonathan is very stressed and his first child makes the house messy. Certainly, there's quite a bit of information that tells us we can infer or suggest that Jonathan is stressed. You don't need to use quotes for this one, but it'd be quite easy to pick up from that last line, are we ready at last, said Jonathan, breathing heavily, are we ready to go? Certainly that might suggest a man who's very stressed, so I would give you a mark for number 3. Number 4, the writer tells us Jonathan is not very patient. Certainly there is evidence of that, but how close that is to his stress? No, they're different answers. No, I would give you a mark for that. There is evidence to suggest that Jonathan is not very patient. And number 5, we find out that Jonathan is an arrogant man, the way he treats his partner. Now, the wording there is brilliant. You would get a mark for that, but it's a close run thing. And I'll come on to why in a second, in fact, why that comes. One word different there would mean number 5 wouldn't get a mark. Liam has done really well there. He's done exactly what I've advised him to do. 5 short sentences, lose the word of the question, taking his time over it to get 5 out of 5. So on course to get a grade 9 if he continues in that way. So well done, Liam. Good work. Okay, you're now going to see on the next couple of screens, because I'm not going to ask anyone else for their responses. You're going to see what I think it was last year's Year 11 wrote in response to this question. Now, this was actually their mock exam, this particular task, and you're going to see exactly what they wrote and why they did or did not get marks. Please appreciate that doing it in a lesson now is very different to sitting in an exam hall, knowing you've got one shot at it when you're quite stressed yourselves, quite panicked about what you're going to write and how you're going to do it and what grade you want to achieve. So it's a very different setup, as you're aware from last year's literature, or not, the case may be. So this is one student's answer from last time for the same question you've just done. You've got 3 out of 5 marks there. The ones in green are the ones that get the mark, and the ones in red are the ones that don't. Now, it says number 4, this student wrote, he argues with his wife a lot. Well, we can tell he argues with his wife, but there's nothing in there that suggests this happens regularly. So the a lot part would mean that this candidate would lose a mark for number 4. Equally, where I thought Liam might have gone wrong earlier is when Liam wrote, we find out that Jonathan is an arrogant man with the way he treats his partner. If the word partner had been changed to wife, we might fall into question there because we're not told that they're married in the line count we're given. We're told they're married in the italic part at the top, which is not part of the bit we're actually looking at. So when it says his wife is called Frances, well, the bit in the line count we're given, line 1 to 17, does not give us that information. So that would not get a mark. So this student obviously suffered from a couple of guesses rather than actually looking at the text and got 3 out of 5. A grade 5 then for this student. The next one clearly wrote a lot more. You can see that. This student added quotes to theirs and wrote slightly longer sentences. Ended up with 3 out of 5 again though, so even though the answer is longer, the marks are still the same. And you know already that you don't get marks for quotes for this. Okay, you don't get marks for using quotes and explaining them for this question. I learned that Jonathan is a negative man and moans a lot. Why does everything have to have me moan Jonathan? That answer could have been ended at Jonathan is a negative man who moans a lot, would have got the mark there. They didn't need the quote. We've got Jonathan doesn't help with managing the holiday, as Laura says, I'm fed up with having to plan it all. That one wouldn't get a mark because they're not going on holiday and it isn't Laura speaking. There isn't a Laura in the extract at all. It's Frances that is being referred to. And I think this student probably meant Lorna and literally got the name wrong. Both of those, I mean, they didn't read the text carefully, so wouldn't get a mark. And lastly, Jonathan doesn't like kids' toys. Well, he doesn't like the mess that's made by them. It isn't saying that he doesn't like kids' toys themselves. So again, too much of a guess, just a broad guess, not somebody who read the text overly in much detail there. So 2 marks lost, but 3 marks gained. 3 out of 5 for that student. And lastly, this one got 4 out of 5 for the following reasons. You can see the first 4 got marks. It takes Jonathan 5 minutes to get ready. He changes Matthew's nappy earlier that day. Jonathan's a father of 2, Matthew and Lorna. Jonathan doesn't like mess. And he had children with Frances, does not get a mark because they've already said that. He's father of 2, Matthew and Lorna. So number 4 is just really repeating bullet point number 3. Hopefully your answers then that you just wrote down are similar in some ways to those, but hopefully you read the text in a bit more detail and were a little bit sort of slower in terms of writing a response to make sure you got 5 out of 5. Moving along then, when we get sent exam papers, or we send off our exam papers each year, we get feedback for each question from the exam board. And this is what they said about question 1. Stronger responses look closely at the question set. So those students are the ones that really look closely at the wording of the question and think about which character is being asked about. They normally get the higher marks, those who read the question carefully. The responses or bullet points you give should directly link or easily be inferred to link to the task set. So that's why I'm encouraging you to use the wording of the question to make sure you're not then saying random information. It has to be exact to what you're being asked. And weaker candidates, lower graded candidates, jump to conclusions based on the whole passage. As you could see from those examples, some of the students just literally just read it through very quickly and just leapt to conclusions without actually looking closely at the set number of lines they were given. Now, I know these are all really easy mistakes to make. They're ones that you do when you're panicked, you're stressed, you're writing quickly. But for an easy 5 marks, it's worthwhile taking the full 5 minutes to actually get your response for this one. My feedback then, with a young looking me in the picture there, back in the days where I'd only be teaching 15 years. You've only got 5 minutes to answer this question, so look at the question carefully to make sure the facts you use link to the question set. Better responses tend to be written in full sentences. It's more likely you're answering the question if you do it in full sentences and don't make any silly mistakes. And to get all 5 answers right, you can't repeat the same points or points that are too similar to each other. So most students, even if they think they've got 5 out of 5, are more likely to get 4 out of 5 simply because they accidentally repeat the same point. One student has just mentioned, one student called Harvey's just mentioned this is a pre-coffee addict McFloyd in the chat, inferring the fact that I possibly drink too much coffee. You can tell this class are finding this almost too easy, I feel. Okay, correct answers then might read as follows, based on the work you've just done. He changed a nappy, he didn't help plan, he is demanding, he thinks he does his bit, he moans about everything and takes too long. That's me writing the shortest answers I possibly could, he obviously being Jonathan in this case, and making 5 bullet points to get 5 out of 5. Okay, based on that then I'm going to finish this revision enterprise with 2 practice questions, one of which the students have seen because they saw it in their last mock, and the other one I'm going to leave them to do at home as kind of revision. Now this task is the one they were set for their last mock exam. It asked them to list 5 things to find out about the Hamiltons from this extract. Now, where some of the students listening lost marks is where they assumed that the focus was on Sam Hamilton. Now, that's not the case. It says Hamiltons as a family. So any reference to just Sam wouldn't get a mark. So saying that Sam Hamilton came to America would not potentially get a mark, but saying he did so with his wife to start a family possibly would. So you've got to be very careful here on whether you're commenting on the Hamiltons as a family or just Sam alone. If you're just focusing on Sam, no marks. You'll also notice, as before, the bit at the top there's in italics, and that does not count towards the line count. Okay, that would be one practice question you could choose to answer. This is the one they did in their mock, and like I said, many of them lost marks because they were just focusing on only one Hamilton rather than looking at the question carefully and thinking it's about the whole family. I'll now leave on the screen another example. Question 1, list 5 reasons why people dread the arrival of the man described in the text. You can see the whole thing's in italics, and it's comes from Carol Shields, The Stone Diaries, and we're looking for 5 reasons that people dread the arrival of the man described in the text. You put bullet points on your sheet of paper, 1 through 5. You use the wording of the question in each response, and you make sure each one is just one sentence long with no quotes needed. Good luck with that one then. All the best for question 1 in the test. This then completes our revision guide for paper 1, section A, question 1. Thank you very much for listening.